Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day we dive into the revolutionary ideas and technologies that are shaping our world. And today I've got an exceptional guest with us. She's a return guest. Her name's Donna Loughlin. She's an award-winning storyteller, PR influencer, and podcast host too. She's recognised as a woman of influence by the Silicon Valley Business Journal, numerous accolades to her name, and she's been at the forefront of innovation in sectors ranging from automotive and transportation to cybersecurity and AI. But today, we're going to explore her insights into integrating AI like ChatGPT into corporate communications. We'll also dive into how AI, agritech, EV and robotics are changing how we live in the future. So whether it's Donna's thoughts on AI-powered chatbots or her personal experiences with the latest cutting-edge technologies, it's sure to be a fascinating conversation. And not only that, we'll have a whole heap of fun along the way. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way stateside, where Donna is waiting to join us once again. So a massive warm welcome back to the show, Donna. Can you remind everyone listening with a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much, Neil. Well, I am a storyteller. I reside in Silicon Valley, and my livelihood and I think my passion all in one is to help create stories about particularly innovators and futurists and taking their bright ideas and their creations and turning them into tangible, products and I would say meaningful products that we can use. And that includes everything from robotics, artificial intelligence to automotive, neurological health and wellness products. So a pretty big array of things. I was a former news reporter before I formed my agency.
Wow, absolutely incredible. And so much has been happening over the last few months since we last spoke, from the AI evolution and integration of AI. It's all entered the mainstream, and we've all been on a bit of a journey from early examples from those Tamagotchi days, remember those, and Furbies, leading up to Siri and Alexa, and now platforms like ChatGPT, which just blindsided many business leaders. But I'm curious, if you to take this whole path that we've been on, how do you see the evolution of AI impacting our daily interactions and corporate world at large, really?
I hate to say it, but it's a little bit about like a mold in your walls. You don't actually know it's there.
Yeah.
But artificial intelligence has been in our workplace and our homes for quite a while, right? And there's a great book that I'm going to point the audience to. It's called Evil Robots, Killer Computers, and Other Myths by Stephen Schwartz, professor and a artificial intelligence expert. Goes all the way back to the early days when IBM Watson was one of the first examples of artificial intelligence. It was actually displayed using the popular game show Jeopardy. And so it was basically beat the system. And IBM Watson actually competed against the number one Jeopardy champion. And so, that's a old example. But as we accelerate and go to where we are today, we've had Siri and we've had Alexa and we've had, even kids' toys, that are talking to us. Google, the AI that's driven in Google and the deep learning there. It's been around us for a while. But I think the one thing that we all need to realize is that in any hands, innovation and technology can be really meaningful and really helpful. But in the wrong hands, it can be really destructive and it could be, a bad thing. So for work performance and I'm going to say for research, I find things like the chatbots that have become popular. I play with a lot of them just out of curiosity and go, are these really going to help me? Are they going to replace me? And once I actually got, my hands familiar with their capabilities and realizing what Dr. Stephen Schwartz talks about is that as humans, we still need to, the cognitive thinking is not replaced by AI. So the beauty of something like a chatbot or ChatGPT is that we can direct it. We can be the composer and the director of how the content is being used. So it's not just a matter of kind of kicking back and saying, ChatGPT, write my my CV and write my book for me. You still have to, give it direction. You need to spell. You need to check grammar. You need to check historical data, because I've had a lot of things come across my desk, marketing campaigns or promotional things from various people and companies. And there's a lot of things that are grammatically incorrect. And I'm thinking this had to be written by a bot.
Yes.
And so I think as humans, we can't take ourselves out of the equation yet. And I think that's a very important component for us, is that use it in a manner that's actually going to augment and help, but don't use it in a manner that is going to replace. So I'm a writer and a communicator. I'm finding a way that I can work with it versus it working against me.
Love that. I love that line you used as well about being a composer and a director of it. And it also sounds like a killer book. So I will be checking that out. And one of the things I always try and do on this podcast is get people thinking differently about how tech is impacting areas that maybe they don't associate with technology. And one area in particular that keeps coming up lately is agriculture. It's seen significant advancements, especially with the integration of AI and smart IoT devices, etc. So I wonder, are you seeing anything here? Are there any standout applications of AI in agritech and anything that you think might potentially reshape the future of agriculture too?
Yeah, so I think one of the first places that we've got to start when we talk about agritech and agriculture is, why is there a shift? So we had a global phenomenon that happened a few years ago, the pandemic, that led to a great exodus of jobs, so the great resignation. Farm workers were not migrating. I reside predominantly in California, and up and down the coast, we have a huge agriculture belt. Northern California has the wine agriculture, and the rest of the California up and down the coast is basically a giant, salad bowl. Up north, we also have rice fields. A lot of people don't realize that California is one of the largest producers of rice. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, labor was cut off. We also had climate change. We had fires, extreme weather, extreme flooding, everything but the locust. I mean, it really was quite a disruptive scenario. And with that, the automation and the need to make autonomous certain functions, such as grow houses. Instead of growing things in severe weather, we can grow things in grow houses. The grow houses have been around for a while, right? Yeah. Tomatoes and vegetables that might only grow in Mediterranean climates and not being grown, indoors. But now putting robots to work to do the planting, the picking, the harvesting, the canning, and all those things that might have been done by humans. And the need to do that isn't because we just want to displace people and outplace their jobs, is that we actually have, I think I read the other day, and the number could be wrong, but in the US alone, 3.5 million jobs are basically absent. It means that there's that many jobs available, but there aren't people to do the jobs. And that's not just in agriculture, it's in every vertical market, hospitality and education and et cetera. But agriculture particularly is a staple for all of us. And so if we're going to continue to combat all the elements and the labor challenges and then the skill, we can train and teach robots how to do a laborious task, such as picking or planting, right? Mm-hmm. I worked the last 3 years with a robotics company, and I want to say agritech, robotics, artificial intelligence, deep learning, autonomous, all in one company called Monarch Tractor. And the intention there was to actually be a companion and an aid to the farmer because of all the things I just described. So you might already have a tractor in the farm, but you don't have an autonomous tractor. I was in Amish country in Northeast Ohio recently, and it was really amazing to see the hands-on nurturing and care, plowing by hand, planting, by human labor, but it's at a much smaller scale. And so I think being sustainable and being green and conscious of the food that we eat and where it comes from, we should all be thinking about that, right? We shouldn't be shopping on the inner aisles at the grocery market. We'd be shopping on the outer markets. And we need to have a connection with food. But because we've had so many things such as food, viruses, and the pandemic, which is technically stemmed back to us being sloppy with food. If you notice, all the major viruses have been either food or animal, plant-based related, right? The lack of care. So as we put intelligence into agriculture, then the robots that are collecting the data can now look at the data and do, what is the soil? Are we going to have rain? Almost, like being like a robotic almanac, right? Is there contamination in food after it's picked? I mean, I've had salmonella from lettuce, which when you read about it, you think, oh, how did this even happen? And it innocently happened to me by going to lunch with a friend. And within 8 hours, I was so sick and I had to try to think, what is this, right? And this is before the pandemic. But food allergies, food illness like that, it's actually in countries where food is scarce. So if you look up certain regions of the world where, food is literally the manna, whether it's, vegetable based or, like a nomadic people go out and they harvest and look for food and they have to keep continuously looking. Us Westerners, a modern world, we consume a lot of food. We consume a lot of waste. We consume a lot of energy. We consume a lot of water. So the entire ecosystem of agriculture is changing because of the consumption and because of the lack of labor and the climate change and then all these other elements. So it's a really big ecosystem of challenges and opportunities.
And you mentioned autonomous tractors a few moments ago, and a little closer to home, I think tech is also having a huge impact on the cars that we all drive. And with your background in automotive AI, I'm curious, how do you perceive the integration of things like chatbot platforms or AI-driven interfaces in enhancing electronic vehicle user experiences? And do you see a future where our vehicles might have a more personalized AI assistant similar to Siri or Alexa? Is that a road we're heading on, do you think?
Yeah, well, I actually call my GPS Sophia. That's not her branded name, but I named her that just because I think it sounds kind of classy.
Yeah.
That I have a personal assist called Sophia. But it's interesting. What's happening now couldn't have started unless the labs and innovators and trailblazers in the automotive space that we're going back quite a bit in time. People assume that Tesla, because of the phenomena of Tesla, and it's not, company's not been around that long. A lot of the situational awareness and the sensor technology and the intelligence that's in the Tesla is like Tesla invented this. That's not the case. Cadillac actually had night vision back in 2000, which was really advanced. And 2007 and later 2000s, Audi had lane assist. Companies like General Motors and Toyota and BMW have been working on these technologies for decades. These aren't new. I mean, they might be new in the scenario of the mindset of the younger driver that's driving these superhuman smart cars. But this technology has been around. Lane assist, Lexus brought that out in early 2000s. So we just assume that all this is new. But one of the big things that's happening right now is really in the advanced driver assistance systems. So think of things like, we used to think that in that category, cruise control, right? You go on a holiday and you're tired. Now my car tells me now, after I've been driving for 2 hours, do you need to take a rest? So Sophia will come on and she said, is it time for a rest? Do you want to pull over for a break? And I'm like, why is she? The first time it happened, I was kind of taken back because I think, why is she checking in on me? But I thought that was actually really, to me, a meaningful approach to just making sure that the driver is safe. So predictability safety are things that are very, very important when it comes to advanced driver assistance. So the human interaction between, when we get behind the wheel and we drive a car, the intelligence that we're now having access to is hopefully going to make us safer and better on the road, not just transparently autonomous drivers on the road. But I do think there is a place for autonomous driving. So emergency vehicles, emergency situations, essential workers, somebody who doesn't have the same capabilities and might be disabled, or a trucking industry. Autonomous trucks are now being used. Imagine during the pandemic, Amazon shipped all around the world. Drivers weren't necessarily going to work, but working with and exposed to COVID on a daily basis. Now, if you do the shipping industry, whether it's 4 wheels or it's on a boat or it's on a plane, wings, and autonomous actually starts making sense. But the one thing that we have to remember, and it goes back to this book about evil robots, killer computers, and other myths, is we have to take responsibility for the technology. We can't just put it in autopilot and have it do the thinking for us. The same way chatbot, we have to tell it what to do, encourage it what to do. And so hopefully, the innovation technology that's happening for consumers and for commercial transport, and the tractor company that I mentioned, a lot of that innovation technology came from the automotive space. It didn't come from the agriculture space. It was imported from the automotive space.
Incredibly cool. And another subject I know is very close to your heart, of course, is robotics. And given the advancements of AI and robotics, I'm curious, where do you envision the boundary between almost human and robotic roles, especially in areas like health tech and healthcare and medical products and advanced surgeries? Are you seeing anything here?
Yeah, I love robots. I don't know if it's my fascination from as a kid, like watching, the Jetsons. Still very much a thing, and going to science fairs and trailing behind my father, the way he was tinkering and stuff. But some of the things in the robotics that I think are great. I personally think that robots that are in the industrial, so we've had robots doing manufacturing for a long time. We have robots that, they make cars. We have robots that are now taking on tedious tasks. So a company called Skyline Robotics out of New York City, and their lab is in Israel, actually is focused on skyscraper window cleaning. So instead of having a couple of guys dangling from thousands of feet in extreme weather, heat, cold, and birds, and you imagine all these other hazards, right? They're actually able to go up with a robotic arm, and the robotic arm actually does the window cleaning. But the robotic arm has deep intelligence and can determine the health of the building. Are there cracks? Is there a window leak? Is the building leaning? Different things like that. But it's not replacing the window washer's job. It's actually giving the window washer new skills. So working with labor and the labor departments and the labor governance within labor is so important to be able to mainstream these types of robots. So imagine a city of the future could have very specific tasks that are being done by robots. Garbage pickup, whether it's France or it's New York City, or even in my hometown where there's been strikes and you don't have garbage being picked up for days or weeks. An autonomous robotic truck, autonomous robot picking up garbage, cleaning, street sweeping, those types of things do make sense, particularly when the younger generation, millennials and Zs, are migrating to those types of jobs. So we're going to continue to have a labor shortage. And so we need to look to, where do we need to fill the gaps in tedious type things. Now, in neurological sciences, this is an area which Elon Musk has been his new banter in research. One of the things that I'm seeing within the medical field is that the intelligence and the data collecting and the management use in the neurological market So, for example, one of the companies that I'm working with right now, and it's a deep dive into me really understanding. I have a background in science and in computers, but not in medical. So it's been really interesting to learn the neurological process and how we think and how we learn and how you correct things such as Alzheimer's and strokes and other neurological damaging things, migraine headaches, what they call cluster headaches or suicide headaches. I've never really, dug into that or understood that. But a brilliant doctor, Dr. Bernuti, and Bernuti Technologies is his innovation arm of what he does. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He's a practicing doctor, but he has created a miraculous team in Cleveland, predominantly out of Cleveland Health, but in Chicago. But he has created a implant neurological chip that actually can be placed not in the brain, which Elon is talking about, which can be quite invasive if you think about it. To go in and implant a chip in your brain sounds very science fiction to me. But in this case, this neurological chip relief is actually plated and closer near your nose, and it's invisible. But it allows that once the implant is in place and you have a device, if the individual is feeling an episode coming on, it's like a cluster headache, and people who have migraine headaches, it's going to be very debilitating. It lasts for days, weeks, right? They can't go to work. They can't drive. You have constant vertigo, other elements. Early prevention of strokes, early prevention of detection of Alzheimer's. Can you imagine you're sitting in your office or you're at home cooking, and all of a sudden an episode comes on, you pick up the device and you scan it in the area where your implant is. And it not only helps reduce the pain, but it actually monitors and tracks the data so that your doctor now has the intelligence, remote and local, which I think is pretty brilliant. So I think we're going to start seeing more things like that. There's an amazing podcast called Huberman Labs out of Stanford University. Dr. Huberman, he's a neuroscientist, and he talks, I think his podcast is daily. I don't know how he does it daily, but I think he does it daily, if not 3 or 4 times a week. His podcast is brilliant because he breaks down neuroscience for the rest of us. And I've been listening to his show for a couple of years, and I think that's a great place for more information. But it's nice to know the advancements in artificial intelligence, deep learning, and neuroscience, the convergence that's happening in all these components are places that you and I would benefit in the future.
Wow, I'm going to be checking that podcast out, that's for sure. And earlier in our podcast interview here, you were talking about experimenting with ChatGPT and learning to work with it, finding it easier to use, or even utilizing it for brainstorming and research, etc. And can you tell me a bit more about diving deeper into how platforms like ChatGPT can revolutionize the field of corporate communications, especially when it comes to real-time customer interactions? Because there's a lot of talk, a lot of hype around it at the moment. And as you said, it's all about getting it to work with you or working with it rather than replacing anyone. But what are you seeing here?
Yeah, the first time, to be honest with you, I was like not a novelty. I'm kind of a late adopter. I hate to say that. As much as I am in tech, I kind of wait and see. Even like I didn't go out and get the first Game Boy or Mario or any of that stuff. I just okay, I'm going to wait for the price to drop. I think it comes from my father, who was he loved innovation and technology, but he always waited for the price. Things used to be more expensive. Laptops and computers were extremely expensive when they first came out, right?
Yeah. And so that means you're not going to be buying the Apple headset for $3,500, then?
No, that definitely has to drop. That's that is definitely a considered purchase. But out of just curiosity, because there was a lot literally a chatter online, and when talking to media editors, talking about it, and I thought, I kind of need to understand what this is. And I even had a couple of clients of mine that say, "Oh, are you going to be writing all your press releases using, chat?" And I'm like, "Well, no. We pride ourselves in providing, personal and communications. I'm not going to be using the machine to write." So I had to play with it. And I was working on writing a book, and I was looking for some information. And so I started, basically giving commands. And it first started out, and it's kind of funny. It's like you get Google yourself, right? The old joke of Google yourself and see if you're fine. So with ChatGPT, I basically, asked who I was, and it came back with minimal information. And then I gave, my name and then my business, and it gave me a little bit more. And then I added, more words, Donna Loughlin, public relations, in my business name, and then Silicon Valley. And then it actually wrote paragraphs, right? And I thought, that's interesting. So that gave me the confidence that I do need to guide it. I do need to, it's like cooking. I love to cook, but I don't use recipes, but I copy and I mock things that I see, right? Based on taste and sight. And then and it's similar to that with ChatGPT, you just kind of play with it. Do you want more spice, or do you want it really plain? If you want it really plain, it's going to spit you back something fairly generic. If you really want to make it a little more exciting, then you you put in more detail, and it will spit out more detail. I did the same thing with other topics and just looking, for research. So I think for research and for factual content, I still go to Wikipedia. I'll still go to Google, look up things. But there are some new versions. So ChatGPT was the one that I played with the most. Apple has their Smart Assist, right? And then I was just told a couple of days ago that everything that I've been looking at has been outdated with a couple other options. And I can't even tell you the name of them right now because I haven't had a chance to play with them. But I think, if I were a child, and going back to how precocious and curious I was, I certainly would kind of find it almost like a gamification, right? Is ChatGPT gives me access to data and content similar to an encyclopedia, which was kind of my era, like every else had an encyclopedia, or at least the school library or the public library had an encyclopedia. Then we went to Wikipedia. And we go to ChatGPT, and it's like, well, to me, it's similar. It's in that realm, right? Accessibility. It's what you do with it next, which is the automation part that we didn't have with those prior components, like Wikipedia, which is still facts, right? Now it's like we're seeking and facting at the same time, which I think is interesting. I'll be curious. My daughter is in college, and I asked her if she's using it, how she's using it. And she says, I'm using it for research. But she's certainly not going to turn in term papers. In fact, this year, they set out a really big mandate that anybody actually plagiarizes and uses, chat and type of technology, and it is known they will automatically fail that class.
Wow.
So universities, it's like the same elementary schools, K through 12, are going to deal with this the same way they had to deal with phones coming into the classroom.
And I was doing a little research on you before you came on the podcast, and I was also reading that you've stressed for many times about the importance of things like integrity, authenticity, and responsibility when using AI platforms like ChatGPT. And as AI continues to evolve, and with the emergence of newer versions like ChatGPT 4 this year, how do you think businesses should approach the ethical challenges of AI, especially when creating content?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
It definitely brings into corporate culture and policy, and what, still a lot of people aren't going to work physically, but I think corporate culture doesn't have, shouldn't have boundaries in terms of if you have remote workers or you have people that are coming to the office. But I do think that, text is a chat, right? Technically, it's a lower end of the spectrum. And then we have online chats, and we used to have chat rooms, and now we actually have, the next advancement But I think, the responsibility starts with, if you're going to be using a tool, then you need to make sure the human factor is there, right? So responsibility. I'm still going to be the person that is actually going to, the writing. So grammar, choosing, choice words, profanity, things like that typically aren't, used in the work environment. Also be careful, for, I'm going to say social, cultural, ESG isms, I like to call them, in terms of, what's acceptable and not acceptable. And then I think the other component is perhaps really being a champion of change in using chat. So for example, I'm in public relations, but marketing groups, I think, and particularly creative writing, could actually do group jam chats and be able to share, content in free, kind of freestyle, coming up with ideas. I think that's a really productive way in which, chat can be used, right? So I did some research. I wrote a couple of paragraphs. I'm going to get some group insight. I post, I share. They jump in. Maybe they use, chat to add other elements. Where I think it goes awry is when I shared earlier that I've received a lot of emails and articles like they're grossly incorrect, and I know they're incorrect because I've gotten things sent to me in email saying, I wrote this article for your client, and I read it and I'm like, hey, where did they get this information? And then I literally see like a quote pulled from a press release, and I'll see a paragraph pulled from an article that ran elsewhere. And then I'll see like a front end and a back end, and none of it actually, literally, it's like the Dr. Seuss push me, pull me. Yeah. Literally, it doesn't make any sense. So that's where I think it goes wrong, is that we assume that it's going back to the driving analogy, that is taking the driver's seat, where I think that we say, well, you know what, you can be a companion, you can sit in the front seat, you can sit in the back seat, but we still need to be responsible in driving.
Love that. And we've covered so much today, and I'm now going to have a little bit of fun with you, though. And we've talked about your career and the things that you've seen and a few predictions for the future, but I'm going to ask you to look back at your career now, because none of us are able to achieve any degree of success without a little help along the way. So I'm curious, is there a particular person you're grateful towards? Maybe they saw something in you, invested a bit of time, helped you get where you are today. Who would that person be and why? We'll give them a little shout out today.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to have to go table stakes all the way back to my father, because he was, in my opinion, one of the brilliant people I've known in my lifetime. He wasn't book smart education-wise until much later in life. He was a tinker and a thinker, and it was a different generation era, went into, the military, Navy, and became a pilot, and was very mechanical. I mean, he could fix and anything, from you're a kid, you look up to your parents, and in my case, my father was like, he can, fix a cut, but he could also fix a plane or a car engine and do all these things. And then later, he owned a printing business, publishing business, and I grew up in the shop, so to speak, of around printing, and so this was publishing. So we had 40 family newspapers, 40 community newspapers, and my uncles were editors and writers. So I grew up in a publishing editorial family and community. That was my after school. That was my preschool. But my father, all the time he was doing that, was educating himself, and then eventually got his degree, and then his master's degree, and then another master's degree well into his 70s. So he was constantly a sponge, a thinker, and a tinker. And he ended up in his late 70s teaching university, which I thought was pretty miraculous, because he was like a walking encyclopedia. But he was all about, really being fearless, and encouraged me, because when I was young, I actually had a speech impediment, and I couldn't say CHs, THs, S's, and R's. So imagine, not being able to say CHs, S's, THs, and R's. There's a lot of words that just sound a little muffled. Yeah. And so I spent many, many, many hours in doing speech therapy, but also my father's brilliant idea was to send me out with my uncles who were news reporters and go out with them. I'm like 8 to 10 years of age, and use it as a means for me to role play, in this case, act and ask questions. If you don't ask, you don't know. And I fundamentally built my entire career on kind of like, if you don't ask, you don't know. I was a news reporter, international news reporter, working for both print, radio, TV, and online, and then eventually public relations. But it wasn't until much later in life that I realized, and particularly when I started writing my book, how much influence that had on me. And it really did. Outside that, I had some great mentors, in my career that would just challenge me. And I would get back papers with so much red ink, it was bleeding, and editorial. And I'm thinking, why? I thought I knew what I was doing, but they were pushing me because they knew that I could be pushed and challenged. And I think that's one thing that I, just as MIT today, and I think if we look at things differently, things that we look at will be different, right? And so I think that evolution of things. Growing up in California, one of my, going back to agriculture, one of my regional, and I say, well, I guess he's internationally known, but Cesar Chavez was pretty pinnacle in my life because of the agriculture and the human rights and labor rights and those things that I saw at a very young age. I actually did my master's thesis on the democratization of the farm workers union, which is so far from what I had been doing. But then this little tractor company came along and they said, hey, I don't think this is actually in your bailiwick, but I understood and I got it because I understood all the challenges surrounding agriculture and the respect of the farmer and the intersection of technology and the social impact. And I think that one of the things that we need to look at with technology is not just the use of the technology and innovation, but what is the social impact? What is the business impact if it's being used in business? And what is the personal growth and development impact that it's going to have to me? So ChatGPT, and I look at this and I say, is it kind of novel right now? It's probably going to be replaced at some point. We were all scared of Nest and IoT smart devices in our home. We were all scared of Siri and Alexas, but now we kind of expect them to be there.
What a great story. Absolutely love it. And finally, I'm going to ask you that about one more time. What was the soundtrack to that story? Was there any songs we can add to our Spotify playlist as we close out today?
Wow. And if you saw my vinyl collection, it's pretty much all British 80s band music that, I still listen to, which is kind of funny. It's talk about nostalgic, everything from the Smiths to the Clash and the Jam and all those guys. But, the theme song that I kind of constantly for years, and it was a Grammy Award winning album, brilliant album by John Batiste, and the lead song Freedom. I think seeing the freedom of thoughts, being thoughtful, being aware, and the freedom to be able to have access to technology and innovation and being able to use it in my creativity. I felt very fortunate that I live in a time and an era where I can actually have access and the freedom to do things. Not everybody has that. I've had a client this last 18 months that is based out of the Ukraine. They don't have the same freedoms that you and I do right now. And there are other cultures and social groups that don't have the same freedoms on an everyday basis. So I think being mindful, and that song to me has so many textures and layers. You listen to it and you pick what freedom that you need, because I think the song is pretty open in terms of how you define freedom.
Wow, I'm going to get that added straight to our Spotify playlist. And what a cool collection of music you got there.
Great for house cleaning. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Well, your whole collection does really. I mean, the Smiths and the Clash and the Jam, all killer, no filler there. And for anyone listening, just want to find out more information about you and your work, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, I hang out in LinkedIn a lot. So it's Donna Loughlin, and that's LOUGHLIN, and then LMGPR LMGPR.com, which stands for Loughlin Michaels Group. LMGPR.com is the company website. And then I have a podcast, Before It Happened, the Before It Happened show that can also be found. There's a link on the LMGPR site as well. But happy to hear from anybody who has questions, thoughts, ideas, or company they need to bring to market. Love to hear from them.
We covered so much in a short amount of time now, from AI evolution and integration and electronic vehicles, automotive AI, robotics, and even had time to talk about some great tunes and a few good books and podcasts along the way. But more than anything, Donna, just a big thank you as always for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Neil. I mean, there's so much to talk about. We would probably run out of coffee and tea at some point, and I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Every time we have Donna on the podcast, we have so much fun. Absolute pleasure having her on here and sharing her unparalleled insights into the worlds of technology, AI, and PR. And I think her journey from early examples of AI like IBM's Deep Blue to today's consumer-friendly chatbot platforms is testament to the rapid advancements we're seeing in tech. And I also enjoyed exploring the potential of AI in enhancing creativity, the importance of human intelligence, though, in fact-checking and customizing content, and also a few of the ethical considerations in utilizing these AI tools. But ultimately, I think Donna's vision of technology intersection with humanity offers a very thought-provoking look at the future and a challenge to be more responsible and equally open-minded and innovative. And for everyone listening, I invite you to join me again tomorrow to help demystify complex technologies, explore how they're solving real-world problems. And remember, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep making a difference with technology. Remember, if you need me for anything, if you want to contact me, if you want to work with me, techblogwriter.co.uk. You'll also find over 2,500 interviews where you'll find so many engaging and comprehensive different perspectives on the world of tech and its impacts on our world. But that's it today, so a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.